Welcome to episode 8 of Design Curious Podcast. I am your host and mentor, Rebecca Ward. Today, I have a wonderful interview with Andrea Reardon. She is a designer in the Dallas-Fort Worth area and has a residential firm there that she started in 2020. She's a self-proclaimed corporate dropout, so she switched careers from the corporate world and then went into design. And today we're talking about how she juggled the transition and the recommendations she has for people who come from another full-time job and want to go into interior design. She has 2 degrees from Texas Christian University, one in business finance and one in interior design. While she was finishing her business degree, she took one interior design course and was hooked. After graduation, she squeezed in TCU interior design classes whenever she could while working full-time, trading crude oil, natural gas, and electricity. So it sounds like an intensive job. She loves what she does, meeting people, seeing their projects, and developing design concepts to make their homes better. She's a planner and doesn't like surprises, so she tends to work ahead and avoid stressful situations. Very smart. She can keep projects on time and on budget, and, as she might mention, she once ran a $2 billion trading portfolio of crude oil derivatives. So she knows her stuff. She can handle her job, and she uses all of that experience for her clients. So I'm really excited to get into the interview today. Let's hear from Andrea. You're now listening to Design Curious, a place where you, creative one, are here to learn about what it really is like to be an interior designer. And I'm your host and mentor, Rebecca Ward. If you're worried about how to succeed in a creative career, if you're ready to learn your next steps to become an interior designer, and if you want the satisfaction of doing something you love every day, you are in the right place. Grab a coffee, a notebook, and let's dig into today's episode. Hi, Andrea. It's great to have you on the show today. Thanks for being here.
Thanks, Rebecca. It's nice to talk to you.
You too. Why don't you tell our audience where you're located and the name of your company?
So I live in Texas. We're in the Dallas-Fort Worth suburbia. Service a lot of North Texas. My firm is my name. It's Andrea Reardon Design, LLC.
Great. And how long have you been in business?
I formed my LLC about 4.5 years ago, and I went full-time into interior design almost exactly 2 years ago.
Okay.
Coming up on 2 years in a couple weeks.
Great. Wow. So let's go back to when you first wanted to become a designer. What was going on in your life?
When I first wanted to become an interior designer?
Yeah. Like how,
that's
when
like
did you
20
know?
years ago.
Okay. So how did you know?
I was in school, and I mean, technically I'd kind of already failed out of engineering school, and my parents sent me to business school. But then I wanted to be in interior design. They said, no, you're just going to go to business school. So I was able to take one class in interior design when I was finishing my finance degree, which was the fall of 97, a couple of years, and loved it. So after I earned my business degree that my parents paid for, and I'm very grateful for, I went back and over many years earned my interior design degree, kind of in 2 separate tranches in 2 periods of time. But then after all of that, I graduated in 2009, and it was not a great time to be in design. So excuse the dog color, I went back into finance.
Okay.
And I worked for a certain billionaire family in Fort Worth for 18 months. And then I worked for a wholesale power company for about 9.5 years. But during that time, I started my company on this.
Okay. Your side hustle.
My side hustle.
Yeah. So was it just the class that you took for interior design during business school that got you interested in design, or did you always have a creative bent inside of you?
Yeah, I've always had that. I took drafting in high school. I was the first student at my high school in Iowa to learn CAD. And yeah, so I'd always kind of had that side, and clearly engineering was not for me. So it was kind of trying to figure out the right combination of these things.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay.
Does that make sense? Yeah.
Yeah. So you're saying your parents wanted you to kind of do engineering or business school, right? So,
Yeah. I mean, I grew up in Iowa in the Midwest, and, I can't say that there are, in our small town, there weren't a lot of successful interior designers. Like, it wasn't a big practice like it is in Dallas, or it is in California or New York, or, that just wasn't in their experience. And I respect that they wanted me to have something that they saw as stable. And it certainly, in the business world, it's, a less cyclical kind of employment cycle.
right.
And I understand all that. So that's where they were coming from.
Well, having a business degree, I think definitely is giving you a leg up now that you started your own business. So,
yeah, it's interesting to see how much of it does cross over. I mean, I'm using it a lot more than I originally thought I would, for sure. And my business experience with, dealing with accounting departments and HR and IT and all these things. It's interesting, for sure.
Yeah. Then let's talk about when you got your business license and you started your side hustle. Were you still working full time for your other job?
Yeah.
Okay.
I was, and it was a really stressful job, and I was working more than 40 hours a week. And my clients in my other job would call me in the middle of the night, all hours, and expect me to tell them how to run their power plants. And I mean, a wrong call could be a 6-figure mistake. And it was a really stressful job.
Oh, gosh.
But I really enjoyed it, and enjoyed the people and the clients and everybody. I just really wanted a more balanced life, and I wanted something a little more creative too. So that's where I really decided to move over. Now, my younger son was in first grade at the time, and he's a bit of a business expert. And he told me it was a really bad idea.
Oh, no.
He's like, you can't get more time by having 2 jobs, Mom.
Oh,
I'm like,
well,
okay, I know.
Yeah.
I know. It's a temporary situation.
Right. That's
Thank
very
you,
astute of him.
7-year-old Zachary, for that. Yeah.
Oh, cute.
So, yeah.
Well, yeah, he was stating the obvious that, you only have 24 hours in a day. So if you're working 50 hours a week, for this one job, where would you find time to fit in starting to build your practice while you were doing that much for the other job?
Yeah, it was a crazy move. I know. I would just sit down every Sunday or Monday, and I would take a sheet of paper, and I knew all the things that I had to do for work, and those were just non-negotiable. I get it. But I would make columns for each day of the week, and I would I would try to slot in things like one phone call or online thing I had to do sometime during Monday, and one thing to do over lunch, an errand over lunch, and one thing I could do after work. And I would also try to slot in, when could I exercise? When could I, do all the kid things? When could I everything? But I would just try to slot in and see where the pieces would fit, because there's more time in a day than, I think we know sometimes, and we realize sometimes. And I think a lot of interior design is just making the pieces fit. Right. So I was like, well, if I'm going to do this, then I have to make the pieces all fit.
Yeah.
But I would make it like a blank piece of paper, and so I could leave it on my desk at work, and no one would be like, oh, what's that?
Oh, right.
What are you doing now, Andrea? Yeah. It wasn't like a pretty stationery or something cute.
Yeah.
No.
Just some scribbles.
Yeah, something that would just blend in. Yeah, I would just map out my time and see where I could make things fit. And I would also, offer people appointments over lunch or nights or weekends, especially if you have kind of dual career families or households, then that would work. And I'd pack a protein powder shake and just be like ready to run out the door when time for me to go to lunch. And I'd dash to Dallas and see some showrooms, or I'd, look at granite or tile or sofas or whatever, and dash back. And I had an agreement with my boss that, hey, I know lunch is supposed to be an hour, but if I go an hour 15 or an hour 30, I'll just make up the time on the back end of the day. Like, I'm getting my hours in. And she was cool with that. And she knew I was getting my work done. Yeah. So that was nice that I could have a conversation with her.
Yeah. And she knew that you were kind of trying to build a business on the side. Were they okay with that, or did they not know?
I did have a conversation, good
Uh-huh.
question, with her about that. And I didn't I didn't know how to start the conversation. So I was like, Cara, I'm selling Tupperware. And she was like, what? I need some Tupperware. And I was like, no, no, wait, let me back up. I'm not actually selling Tupperware, but I'm trying to communicate to you that I have a side hustle that doesn't compete with this business.
Mm-hmm.
And she was like, oh, where can I get some Tupperware? So she was not very concerned.
Okay. Yeah. Well, it's
Yeah.
not a
So
competing
yeah.
field or anything like that, so it wasn't to be concerned. But as long as you're getting your job done, getting the hours that they were requiring from you, I think it would be fine. So
Exactly. Yeah. That was the point I was trying to make.
yeah, yeah. Well, that's good. I mean, because I don't know. I mean, I guess in your industry, maybe I don't know if people usually go off and start a side hustle out of finance and so if they see that a
Yeah,
lot.
it's a little unusual, especially in interior design. But this company they'd had a handful of people, interestingly, leave for this or that. More women than men, which is
Mm-hmm.
telling. Interesting,
Yeah.
interesting question. But they'd seen that from time to time, and I kind of wonder if my boss wondered what I might do long term. But she was really sweet about it, and she'd known me in the industry for 20 years at that point, more than 20. Anyway, we don't need to get into math about how old I am. But yeah, and I think she saw it coming on some level, but it still was kind of, just a surprise. And then the real surprise was the very next day. We were sitting on the trade floor and we always had all the screens up with all the prices at all the nodes of power, and CNC was up, and they said COVID-19 is coming to the US. I'm like, really? The very next day? So that was a little scary.
Oh man.
But as you know, the industry actually was better off
It was
for it for a
yeah.
bit, for sure.
Yeah.
So that was interesting. Now I didn't have my salary entirely replaced when
Mm-hmm.
I did make the cut over, but it was time
Yeah.
to say a prayer and leap and do it. So it was the right time for me and for our family, but still kind of scary. So it all worked out.
How did you manage those fears of like going off on your own and, trying to not being able to replace your salary?
I'm a spreadsheet person.
Yeah.
So there are a lot of spreadsheets about, what our expenses were and how much we were paying for sitters and kid transportation and all of those things.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, I have to keep in mind, like, there's some avoided costs of not having some extra help and some extra things, and just kind of
Mm-hmm.
cutting back on the extras for a bit. And
Yeah.
it's all worked out. But
Good.
I did look at, going part time with
Mm-hmm.
the power company and that kind of thing. Ultimately, they thought they were open to it and then they weren't. But
Oh,
that would have been a really tricky thing, trying to
yeah.
split my time between one and the other and not really doing either.
Yeah. That'd be a real task on your brain, I think, like trying to switch gears for half a day, and not just like before where you're just fitting design in, but really most of the time tuned to your business or to the company. So, yeah. Any other advice you have for someone who's starting out in the career or something that you wish you had known now that you're 2 years in before you had gotten started?
It's hard to know where to start. There's so much
Yeah.
research to do in so many things, but just make a list and fit
Mm-hmm.
it in, make time for it,
Mm-hmm.
and find your peer group.
Yeah, I think that's really important, having that community who can support you as you're getting your feet wet. Like if you have a group of designers that you can call and be like, hey, I need a art hanger or, a painter or something like that, and that they're able to share some sources with you. That'd be really helpful. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. There were a couple of people I reached out to, even just for that. And they didn't necessarily
Mm-hmm.
have time to meet or anything, but I could reach out like that. And
Mm-hmm.
that was really helpful. And some of the Facebook groups and everything else
Good.
too. Yeah. I did like that book. I found it a little bit late for me, but it's called Don't Keep Your Day Job by Kathy Heller. So I wish I'd found that a little sooner.
Do you find that interior design is one of the more common, or as a second career, it's pretty common from what I'm
It
finding?
is. I think the top two, this is what I've heard anecdotally. I haven't seen it on any real, Wall Street Journal job survey or anything, but I've heard the top two are real estate agent and interior designer for like second careers.
Yeah, I know a lot. Obviously being in the industry, I know a lot of people who have chosen interior design as a second career, but also real estate, now that you mention it, has a lot of pull for people.
Mm-hmm. It is. And, it's a little more flexible. You can find times to fit it in. Obviously, you still have to do a lot of work, but I think it's interesting for people like that. Yeah.
Great. Well, where can everybody find your beautiful portfolio or reach out to you if they have any questions?
Facebook and Instagram and all the places. Andrea, and her last name spelled funny, Reordan. Andrea Reordan.
Great. And we'll include that in the show notes so everybody can find it.
Okay.
Well, thanks
so much, Rebecca.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. It's great talking with you and hearing your story.
Thanks. Good to see you.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Bye. So as we heard from Andrea, it is possible to go from one career to interior design. And she told us how she transitioned. She was working 50 plus hours a week at her day job and still was able to launch her design company because of her can-do attitude. And I really admire that. And she has some great advice that she mentioned in the podcast. And we will put her contact information in the show notes so you can check her out. And if you have questions for her, you can reach out to her about how to transition if that's something you're looking to do yourself. One of the recommendations she mentioned in the podcast was Kathy Heller's Don't Keep Your Day Job, How to Turn Your Passion into Your Career, which is a book. But Kathy also has a podcast of that same name, and I have listened to it myself, and it's very good. So shout out to fellow podcaster Kathy Heller. You guys can go check her out as well. So that's it for this week. Stay tuned for another great episode in the Design Curious podcast next week. All the information can be found on my website, rwarddesign.com. If there's a topic you'd like me to discuss in the podcast, go ahead and reach out to me in an email, podcast@rwarddesign.com. And we will be back next week with more information for you, Curious One, on if interior design is the career for you. Thanks for listening. If you love this episode, please leave a rating and a review. This helps me reach other curious creatives like you. If you have a topic request or would like to contact me, simply head over to my website, rwarddesign.com, or email me at podcast@rwarddesign.com.